Hi, my name is Janet Belland and welcome to the Lobos Institute Midwest. Today my presentation will be on teaching Mands to non-vocal children with autism. The purpose of this presentation is to evaluate the effectiveness of different teaching strategies and seek to increase the use of Mands in ways in which one can determine how to choose a Mand training procedure. To begin, I want to highlight the diagnostic criteria of the autism diagnosis that applies to this presentation. Here's the section of the DSM-5 that describes the deficits in social communication and social interaction in regards to verbal behavior. It describes the way in which an individual communicates in the environment, and as many of you know, this is a common deficit in children with autism. It's often a symptom that parents notice first. More importantly, I want to point out the usage of the words nonverbal and verbal. Here, the DSM seems to be using nonverbal as a way to describe an individual that does not produce vocalizations. During this presentation, the words verbal, vocal, nonverbal, and nonvocal will be used, and I'd like to take the time to clarify these definitions, distinctions, and how they are and are not Mands. In Chapter 8 of Skinner's Verbal Behavior, he refines his definition by being behavior reinforced through the mediation of other persons who must be responding in ways which have been conditioned previously in order to reinforce the behavior of the speaker. Verbal behavior can come in many different forms, and it all depends on whether or not the behavior function is communication, and in reference to the surrounding antecedents, and if there's any sounds that are included. Here are examples of different types of behavior if a child wanted a toy. I should note that some examples are listed multiple times because there can be more than one type of behavior. In the example for verbal behavior pointing for toy, this is also an example of non-vocal behavior. I want to clarify these distinctions because for the remainder of the presentation, I will be using these terms to describe the participants and their skill levels as I discuss strategies when teaching Mands. The first article I will be evaluating is Generalized Imitation in the Mand, Inducing First Instances of Speech in Young Children with Autism. It's by Ross and Greer, published in Research and Developmental Disabilities in 2003. There are multiple purposes of this article and they're listed here, however the main objective is bolded. To implement the generalized imitation tactic to obtain words and initial vocalizations without relying on repetitive shaping procedures. The dependent variables were vocal imitations, which were defined as vocal speech with a close or identical approximation to the speech of the model, Mands, which were defined as vocal requests emitted without a model, and generalized vocal imitations, which were vocal responses that were a close approximation to the speech model but followed a rapid number of non-vocal motor imitations. Participants were A, B, C, D, and E, all elementary students above the age of 5 attending a large public school kindergarten or first grade autism unit that resided within the school. Additionally, they all exhibited these characteristics. They did not have spontaneous vocal speech, they did not imitate vocal speech, they did not have generalized imitation repertoires as determined by assessments, the experimenter, and parental or teacher reports. Prior to the beginning of the study, pre-baseline procedures were used to confirm these reports, teach subsequent skills necessary for participation, take Mand training baseline, and to identify reinforcers. Treatment involved the teacher choosing one pre-identified reinforcer, choosing the form of word to teach, and targeting it during that one session. Sessions lasted 30 minutes long and looked like this. Eye contact is requested, motor imitation trials were conducted, and a verbal imitation trial of the target word was provided, followed by reinforcement contingent on correct responding. If steps 1 through 4 were implemented successfully, then step 5 was conducted identically as step 3, but without motor imitation trials. And if that was successful, step 6 was conducted identically to step 3, but without the verbal model. If at any point there was an error, the teacher would start over from the beginning. After 2 consecutive incorrect responses, more actions to the motor antecedent sequence were added, or the reinforcer was changed. And the session would end when the targeted word occurred without the generalized imitation antecedent procedure. The rapid imitation of modeled motor imitations during treatment resulted in generalized vocal imitations for all subjects and independent manding for 4 of the 5 participants. Results were extremely specific as the number of opportunities to respond varied across participants. But on average, the 4 participants who learned Mands averaged 0% during baseline and 80 to 90% at follow-up sessions. So what does this mean? This fading procedure effectively transferred stimulus control from the generalized imitation tactic to a vocal imitation probe to a nonverbal antecedent, and the use of these rapid imitations of modeled motor behaviors before an opportunity to respond increased the operant Mands for non-vocal children with autism more than just man training alone. It also means that this was a successful procedure for these participants when the man training procedure that was taken and evaluated at baseline was not as successful. This procedure did not rely on repetitive shaping procedures, but unfortunately needed extensive pre-training programming. Pre-training and programming include multiple motor imitation teaching trials, and it might have taken years for some of these participants to learn. Additionally, they needed to learn to sit and wait in a chair and make eye contact. Knowing all of these things, this would most likely be a procedure best suited for early intervention individuals, but has a great opportunity to provide nonverbal children with autism, and it's a new strategy in learning Mands. The next article I will be evaluating is the effects of prompting, fading, and differential reinforcement on vocal Mands in nonverbal preschool children with autism. It's by Thomas Lefasicus and Sturmey, published in Behavioral Interventions in 2010. The study investigated the effectiveness of prompting, fading, and differential reinforcement to teach independent vocal Mands to nonverbal children with autism spectrum disorders by sequentially teaching pointing, eye contact, oral motor approximations, imitative vocalizations, and finally independent vocalizations for preferred items. The targeted behaviors were independent vocal Mands, defined as vocalization without any model or prompt was appropriate for the context and corresponded to the label, immature Mands, which were defined as reaching or grabbing, yelling, or leading, and appropriate responses, which included independent vocal Mands, pointing, looking, oral motor approximations, and echoic vocalizations. The participants were Isaac, 3.2 years of age. He could vocalize the sounds B and M, exhibited no eye contact, and to gain access to preferred items, he would normally reach or lunge to grab it. Lindsay, 3.6 years of age, could vocalize the sounds K, M, D, P, and N, exhibited no gestural or no vocal Mands, and would yell for or reach for preferred items. And Sean, 3.6 years of age, who could vocalize the sounds B, M, P, K, D, and G, exhibited limited eye contact and no vocal Mands, but would lead an adult, reach, and yell for preferred items. After the preference assessments were completed, contrived motivation through restricted access was implemented, and the experimenters selected preferred items that matched the first phoneme of the target word or preferred items with an existing high-frequency occurring sounds. For example, if ball was a highly preferred item and the participant frequently vocalized ba, then the experimenter selected saying ball for the child's target response. There were 4 steps to this intervention. Step 1 was nonverbal replacement man training. This is where the experimenter did not give the item to the child if the child emitted immature Mands, and the experimenter would only give the item to the child if the child emitted independent or prompted point, most to least physical prompting that taught for the formation of the pointing gesture. Step 2 consisted of eye contact training. This is where the researcher would move the item towards their own face until the participant's eyes met the researcher's face, eyes, or mouth to gain access to the item. Step 3 consisted of oral motor training, and if the subject pointed to the preferred item, looked at the face, eyes, or mouth of the researcher, and displayed any slight approximation of the target sound or similar oral motor movement, the experimenter would give the item to the child. This is the step where the experimenter modeled the target sound as the subject made eye contact. Step 4 consisted of vocalization training, and if the subject pointed to the preferred item, looked at the face, eyes, or mouth of the researcher, and accurately echoed the vocal target sound model, or independently vocalized, then the experimenter would give the item to the child. Results showed independent vocal requesting across all participants, and child behavior changed upon the introduction of the treatment. This concluded that there was a functional relationship between the treatment and the child behavior. The introduction of the treatment package resulted in a large change in these child's Mand repertoires, including increases in Mand, but additionally, a reduction in immature Mands. Follow-up data was only available for 2 of the 3 participants, as Sean was unable to participate, but it showed that Isaac and Lindsay had acquired several new vocal Mands, including 4 questions were asked about the value, acceptability, the teaching method, the teaching time, overall speech acquisition, and whether or not the rater would recommend the program to other parents and children. This represented the social validity of the study and for the 2 subjects who participated in follow-up, on a 5-point scale, the mean rating was 4.9. Limitations, however, included the unknown importance of the order in which the experimenter taught the response, or the time window, or the criterion requirements. This needs clarification, and future research should investigate procedural variabilities. Also, it was unclear why Isaac's independent vocal mands increased during follow-up. The author speculated that Isaac's requesting and his vocal imitation skills may have generalized to his natural environment. This would have given him repeated presentations of similar items during the 2 months following training. So what does this mean? This means that even younger children with autism can improve upon their manding skills. It also means this procedure needed less prerequisite skills than the previous study, as it took less time. It not only taught other vocal skills, verbal skills, as pointing, it was effective for decreasing inappropriate manding, those immature mands. And it provided socially validating data. The final article I will be discussing is the Evaluation of a Vocal Mand Assessment and Vocal Mand Training Procedures by Barrett, Wilmer, and Rapp, published in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis in 2004. 2 studies were combined to evaluate an assessment method for vocal mand deficits to be used as the basis for implementing specific intervention strategies. This was designed to help identify which common procedures were used in the production of vocal mands and which would be most helpful or irrelevant in producing the desired outcome. This is the study where we see the greatest variability in participants. While all of them seem to be similar in their receptive and expressive abilities regarding following directions and vocal mands, their ages differ from 6 years to 14 years to 18 years. And their diagnosis vary as well, providing a wide range of ages and diagnosis to assess. The free operant preference assessments used to evaluate the reinforcers included an array of 5 to 7 stimuli, placed equidistant from the participant, and data was collected on the duration of contact for each item. The authors used this information to choose topographies for the mands for each reinforcer. This represents the order of events for each trial. The prompt sequence and reinforcement contingencies were arranged to maximize the likelihood of the participant responding, or close to, the terminal goal of unprompted full utterances. If at any time the participant said the entire targeted word, the reinforcer was delivered immediately for the remainder of the trial, and all further prompts were eliminated. For example, if the participant uttered the target word at 5 seconds into the trial, he would be allowed access to the reinforcer for the remaining 55 seconds, and no additional prompts would be delivered. The idea was to determine at which place the individual could respond correctly, and to determine the necessity of most intensive interventions for the production of a target mand. For example, if the responding occurred and was maintained consistently following the model prompt, then prompting and reinforcement would be indicated as the effective procedure for production of the vocal mands. Responses were either scored as full utterances or partial utterances. The assessment results for each participant suggested a different procedure for producing vocal mands. Will's results indicated a prompting and reinforcement design. Mike's results indicated a shaping and stimulus fading design. And Nick's results indicated a prompt fading design. For Will, prompting and reinforcement were implemented to produce 2 new mand topographies. The 2 words chosen were music and video. Will never either said music or video in baseline, and when these procedures were implemented, both words were omitted for the first time. Results provided a systematic replication of the findings from Study 1 because Will and a verification of the treatment derived directly from the assessment results. It appears that prompting was necessary to evoke a change from 0 levels of responding to low levels of prompted responding to finally the occurrence of target mand independence of prompting. For Mike, responding was observed in the assessment only after prompts, so his treatment involved using prompts of successive approximations to the targeted mand. In each phase, the prompts and the reinforcement contingency was changed to work as a changing criterion design to demonstrate experimental control. Data indicated that shaping and stimulus fading were effective in producing a novel topography of mand for Mike. Unfortunately, the prompts were never eliminated for the teaching sessions. For Nick, his assessment of vocal manding showed that he frequently uttered the word radio, so shaping was not necessary, but the response was prompt dependent. So as to fade the prompting procedure, it was implemented to weaken the control exerted by prompts. 2 mands were targeted for Nick, radio and Play-Doh. The proportion of unprompted and responding increased to 100% in the final 3 sessions of Phase 3. Unfortunately, baseline procedures remained in effect for Plato across all sessions, which also had an increase in unprompted responding during the final 3 sessions. This could be due to either generalization from the treatment condition or the effects of unknown extraneous variables, but it does imply a loss of experimental control. In conclusion, I'd like to mention some of the highlights of the research on MAN training. MAN training can and should be individualized to the client seeking training. We've seen that assessments can be easy to implement and provide information on specific individual interventions best suited for the subject. We have also seen how MAN training can be effective across a wide range of ages, subjects, and diagnoses. Unfortunately, MAN training can be lengthy and often be effective in teaching one MAN over an extensive period of time. As in the case of Mike, who had an inordinate amount of time spent teaching one MAN, when in fact the authors were able to teach Mike an extensive MAN repertoire using picture cards outside the study. Evaluations of using pictures such as PEC system and sign language could definitely be alternative forms of MAN training and provide within prompts to allow individuals to request their needs and wants. Finally, only one study collected data on the social validity of MAN training, but all studies provided anecdotal comments regarding the value of teaching functional verbal behavior to the individual and their family. I'd like to thank the Lovas Institute for allowing me to use their facilities in this presentation, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.